What if the person you rescued as a child turned out to be the one who would rescue your soul years later? Imagine being traded like a bargaining chip, not for money, but to settle your father's secret gambling debts. Now imagine that the man you were given to is known across town not just for his wealth, but for his chilling reputation. That's exactly what happened to a quiet, artistic girl named Lily Hartman. Her life had been shaped by grief, abandonment, and manipulation until she found herself standing at the gate of a mansion that would change everything. But this isn't your typical Cinderella story, because behind the lavish walls and whispered warnings lay secrets buried deep in fire, betrayal, and fate. And on their first night, when she expected cruelty, he did something else entirely. This isn't just a story about trauma and survival. It's a journey of rediscovering identity, confronting old wounds, and learning how two broken people can become whole again. And just when you think the worst is over, betrayal strikes in the most personal way imaginable. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end, because what starts with abandonment ends with one of the most unexpected twists in love you'll ever hear. Welcome to John Stories channel, where romantic tales are brought to life with heart and soul. Immerse yourself in a world of emotions, where every voice brings you closer to heartfelt, unforgettable love stories. If you enjoy romantic audio stories, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Lily Hartman was born into a legacy she never chose, and one that never wanted her. The only daughter of Jonathan Hartman, she lived in a quaint southern town better known for its handcrafted leather shoes than for the people who made them. Her mother, Anna, died during childbirth, her last breath exchanged for Lily's first. And from that very moment, Lily's life was an uphill climb. Jonathan, once a proud and loving man, never quite recovered. And instead of channeling his grief into fatherhood, he let someone else step in. Meredith, a woman as cold as the marble countertops she so adored. She married Jonathan not long after Anna's passing. And while she smiled at the townsfolk and dressed in lace to church, her heart remained a locked vault, except when it came to her own daughter, Chelsea. For Lily, life inside the Hartman home was like walking barefoot over broken glass. School was a luxury denied. Friendships only allowed through windows and whispers. And birthdays, forgotten, replaced by chores and silence. While Chelsea got music lessons and ballet recitals, Lily got scolded for breathing too loud. Her only refuge was the attic window and the old sketch pads gifted to her by Gloria, the family's housekeeper. Gloria had a mother's touch, and though she couldn't change Lily's fate, she did her best to soften the blows. She saved small pieces of her paycheck just to buy colored pencils and let Lily dream on paper, if not in real life. What kept Lily going wasn't just art, it was a silent promise to herself. If she could survive the pain, if she could endure without becoming like them, then maybe, just maybe, the universe would notice. But when Jonathan's shoe business began to fail, that fragile hope shattered into something far more dangerous. Because Jonathan had been hiding more than his grief. He had been gambling for years, quietly borrowing from anyone who would lend, until he met one man whose terms came with consequences no one dared challenge. Enter Declan Cross. On the surface, Declan was a real estate tycoon, young, rich, and enigmatic. But beneath the sharp suits and private jets was a shadowed figure in the town's underworld. He didn't just collect debts, he collected secrets, weaknesses, and favors. And when Jonathan couldn't pay, Meredith offered something else. Lily. Not as a bride, not yet, but as a live-in maid at Declan's estate. Just for a few weeks, they said, until Jonathan could figure things out, until the money came in, until honor was restored. Lily, too loyal to her father and too naive to question the arrangement, agreed. Not out of obedience, but out of a quiet desperation to protect the only shred of family she had left. Meredith's words still echoed in her mind. "Do this, and your father won't lose everything." So Lily packed a small suitcase, some clothes, her sketchbook, and a few pencils, and left the only home she'd ever known. The mansion stood alone on a wide stretch of land, hidden behind gates twisted with iron vines and old secrets. When the black car pulled up, she took a shaky breath. She wasn't scared. Not exactly. But something about the place felt off, like the walls themselves had seen too much and chose to remain silent. The door opened not with warmth, but with warning. An older man, gray-haired and stone-faced, introduced himself as Mr. Rowan. He said little, only that Mr. Cross was expecting her, and that she'd be shown to her quarters. No one asked her name. No one cared that she was barely 18. She was luggage, a placeholder, a temporary fix. Declan didn't greet her at the door. He sat in a study, back turned, framed by leather books and darker intentions. When she entered, he didn't even look up. "You know why you're here," he said, voice like poured granite. "Yes," Lily replied, bowing her head. "Then there's nothing more to discuss." That was it. No welcome, no threat, just dismissal. And yet, she couldn't help but notice something strange in the way he paused, like he knew more about her than she knew about herself. Her room, unlike the rest of the cold mansion, was oddly well kept. A real bed, clean linens, a window that opened to a garden she hadn't noticed outside. It wasn't kindness, she reasoned, just convenience. Still, she sat on the edge of the mattress, fingers digging into the fabric, like it might vanish. She didn't cry. Not yet. Lily had learned long ago that tears only fed the fire of those who wanted to see you burn. The next morning, she wandered the halls trying to find the kitchen, hoping to start on the maid duties she assumed were expected. But what she found instead was confusion. The kitchen was state-of-the-art, touch panels, chrome surfaces, no knobs or dials she recognized. "This isn't a kitchen," she muttered. "It's a spaceship." A deep voice startled her. "Planning to burn my house down, Miss Lily?" She spun around. Declan. Leaning against the doorframe, arms folded, watching her like a puzzle he couldn't solve. But what happened next broke every expectation. Instead of scolding her or mocking her ignorance, Declan stepped into the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and began to cook. That moment, the clink of a knife, the hiss of a skillet, was the first real sound of kindness Lily had heard in years. Lily stood still, watching in disbelief, as Declan, the man whose name alone made grown men flinch, calmly stirred a pot of boiling water and instructed her how to sauté vegetables. There was no sarcasm in his tone, no mockery. His movements were precise, almost elegant. She expected a tyrant, maybe even a monster. But what she saw was someone human. Cold, yes. Distant, absolutely. But not cruel. At least not in this moment. "Use a light touch," he said, passing her a spoon. "Cooking is about control, not force." She nodded, her fingers trembling as she mimicked his motion. His gaze never left her, not in a predatory way, but in a peculiar intensity, as if trying to recognize a melody half forgotten. That morning marked a subtle shift. Meals became the only real space where Declan and Lily interacted. Breakfasts were quiet, but shared. Lunches turned into brief conversations about technique or ingredients. And dinners sometimes lingered into soft silences beneath the antique chandeliers. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was the absence of fear, and in a place like this, that was powerful. And then one evening, something broke open. Declan came in from an early workout, sweat on his brow, pulling his shirt over his head. Lily, glancing up from her sketchpad at the dining table, froze mid-stroke. There, across his left ribs, ran a long, jagged scar. Old, but unmistakable. Her heart stopped. She had a scar just like it. Same side, same length, same burned-into-memory shape. Years ago, Lily had nearly died in a fire. Not by accident, by choice. She had run into a collapsing lakeside cabin to save a little boy trapped inside. Flames licking the walls, floorboards caving in, and smoke choking the air. She'd found him, screaming and scared, curled in the corner. Together, they escaped through the back and jumped into the lake to survive. She had told him one thing before they parted. "Orion, remember that word." It was nonsense, a made-up word she used to signal courage, but in her child mind, it meant something sacred. And now, she was staring at that same boy, only grown, hardened, wealthy, powerful. No, it couldn't be. "Did you say something?" Declan asked, noticing her wide eyes. She didn't answer. Her lips parted, but no sound came. That night, sleep betrayed her. She tossed and turned, haunted by memories that were no longer memories, but possible truths. Could it be him? Could this man, feared by bankers and respected by criminals, be the child whose life she once saved? Subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey. The next morning, with trembling resolve, she walked to the garden where Declan often read. He sat on a wooden bench, a book in one hand, sunlight catching the edge of his profile. "Declan," she said quietly. He looked up. "Something wrong?" She hesitated. "When you were about 8, were you ever trapped in a fire? In a lakeside cabin?" He blinked, slowly closed the book. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I was there. I was the girl who pulled you out." A long silence followed. Then, without a word, Declan stood, walked over and gently lifted the edge of her sleeve. There it was, her own scar, faded, but matching his exactly. His voice softened to a whisper. "Orion. You said that word." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "It's you," she choked out. "You're the boy I saved." They stood there, still, the weight of years pressing in on their shoulders. In that moment, the past collided with the present, folding into a shape neither of them could deny. It wasn't fate. It wasn't a coincidence. It was something older, stranger, like a story they had both started writing without knowing they'd ever find the ending. From that point forward, everything changed. They didn't need to explain themselves anymore. In the language of silence and shared scars, they communicated more deeply than most people ever could. The mansion, once filled with cold echoes, began to hum softly with warmth. Lily found herself spending evenings by the window, sketching again. Not just to escape, but to create. And Declan, strangely enough, started sharing his dreams. He told her how he once wanted to build a sanctuary for children, a place where they could paint, sculpt, or simply feel safe. Not because he was a saint, but because once someone had saved him, and he never forgot what that meant. One night, under the stars, Lily asked him, "Do you believe we were meant to meet again?" Declan stared at the constellations before replying, "I don't believe in coincidence." She smiled. "Maybe it's so I could learn to trust again, and you could learn to love." He didn't respond with words. He simply reached for her hand and held it, firm, grounding, real. It would have been the perfect ending, but real life rarely works like that. 3 days before their engagement, the past came back to devour her future. Lily was in her room, trying on a simple ivory gown, when a maid delivered a gift. It was a small box, no note. The moment she opened it, a strange, sweet scent hit her nose, and then the world spun. She collapsed, unconscious before she could even call for help. When she woke, the cold hit her first. The smell of mildew, the feel of rope cutting into her wrists. The room was the old Hartman family basement. The door creaked open, and in stepped Chelsea, her stepsister. "Did you really think you'd get a fairy tale ending?" she sneered. "You were always the spare, the shadow. Now you're out, I'm taking your place." She fought against the restraints, eyes wide with betrayal. But Chelsea only laughed and slammed the door shut. Back at the mansion, Declan grew restless. Lily had vanished without a word. Gloria, now semi-retired but still present, felt something was wrong too. They called Mr. Walker, an old friend of the family now in charge of helping Declan manage his properties. He was the one who finally traced Lily's last known location. When they arrived at the old house, it looked abandoned, but a faint sound from below, the softest of thuds, told them otherwise. They found her in the basement, bruised but alive. "Papa," she sobbed into Jonathan's chest as he cut the ropes and held her close. For once, the father who had failed her so many times came through when it mattered most. Declan, the moment he saw her, didn't say a word. He simply pulled her into his arms and held her tighter than ever before. She whispered, "I'm okay. I'm home." But inside, her heart was still shaking. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day. The next morning, with soft scent of blooming jasmine outside her window, but the weight in her chest hadn't lifted. She walked through the quiet hallways of the mansion, her bare feet touching the cool wooden floors, each step feeling heavier than the last. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something deeper. The realization that the wounds she thought had scabbed over were still raw. Chelsea had been caught, of course, detained and held under constant watch until the police arrived. But Lily needed closure, not justice. That afternoon, she walked out to the courtyard where Chelsea sat, under guard, silent and small in the corner of a stone bench. The same girl who once looked down on Lily from their marble staircase now sat stripped of pride, her chin tucked into her chest, her eyes glassy. Lily approached slowly. "Why?" she voiced. "Why did you do this to me?" Chelsea didn't lift her head at first. When she did, her voice was almost hollow. "Because you always had what I didn't." Lily stared at her, stunned. "You had love," Chelsea muttered. "Dad's regret, Declan's attention. You were the fire. Even when they tried to snuff you out, I was the shadow. And for that, you would risk my life?" Lily's voice cracked, not from fear, but from the ache of betrayal. Chelsea's jaw tightened. "If I had even a sliver of a real chance with him, if I could have had what you did—" "You can't steal love, Chelsea," Lily interrupted. "It's not something you take, it's something you earn. You don't find it by lying or by tying someone up in a basement. You find it by showing up, every day, even when it's hard." Chelsea turned away. She had no retort, no last jab, just silence. And Lily, instead of indulging in vengeance, walked away. Not because she was weak, but because she had grown beyond the need to win. Her power now came from something deeper. She wasn't the girl they had tossed aside anymore. She was the woman they could no longer break. As the days passed, life at the mansion softened again, but this time there was something different in the air, like everyone had collectively exhaled. Declan's voice had lost its sharpness. Even Mr. Rowan, the stoic caretaker, began cracking faint smiles. It was as if Lily's presence had rewired the mansion's emotional DNA. And then came the wedding. No grand ballrooms, no celebrity guest lists, just a garden, fresh flowers, some candles, and the people who mattered. Lily wore a pale blue dress because it reminded her of calm skies after storms, and Declan, for once, looked utterly human in a simple white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Are you sure?" he whispered, taking her hands under the afternoon sun. Lily's eyes shimmered. "More sure than I've ever been." Their kiss wasn't the beginning of something. It was the return. Two lives that had once crossed in fire and fear were now choosing, intentionally, to walk beside each other. Time passed. Lily didn't chase galleries or fame, though her paintings began attracting attention across the country. She opened a studio near the same lake where she had once saved Declan, now turned sanctuary. The space was filled with light, easels, and children from all walks of life, many of them broken in ways adults never noticed. She didn't paint for applause. She painted because she had something to say.
Every canvas was a message. You can survive. You can heal. You are not what happened to you. Declan changed too. He stepped back from the cold edges of his former world. No more underground lending, no more whispered threats. Instead, he poured his wealth into something radical: hope. He became a legitimate investor, focusing on young artists, community schools, women-led businesses. He knew the system because he had once bent it. Now, he was determined to reform it. Together, they became the kind of couple that made people believe love wasn't just a fantasy, it was a process. Messy, brave, and transformative. And on one quiet afternoon, years after the wedding, Lily found herself back at the cemetery where her mother rested. She held a bouquet of white lilies and knelt at the gravestone. "Mom," she whispered, brushing her fingers across the engraved name, "I'm okay now. I'm not afraid anymore. I know you were watching, even when I felt alone." The tears that came then weren't bitter. They were soft, freeing. Behind her, Declan stood in silence, watching her speak to the past, respecting the moment. Later that evening, back at their lake house, their 5-year-old daughter was sprawled on the porch with a box of crayons, trying to color a picture of the sky. "Mom," she asked, holding up her page, "does it have to look real?" Lily knelt beside her and smiled. "No, sweetie, it just has to feel real." And that's when you realize the power of stories like this. Not because they're flawless fairy tales, but because they show us how real healing begins. Not with revenge, not with dramatic declarations, but with small choices, daily acts of grace, and the courage to confront pain with compassion. And that brings us to a bigger question, one that many people quietly wrestle with. Can people really change? In Declan's case, the answer was yes, but not because of some magical romantic transformation. It was because he was seen. Underneath his armor, someone recognized his wound. Lily didn't save him with kindness. She challenged him with her honesty, and in doing so, gave him the room to reshape himself. In the real world, stories like Lily and Declan's are rare, but not impossible. Take the example of a woman named Christina, who grew up in a home not unlike Lily's: emotionally distant parents, a stepmother who saw her as competition. Christina buried her emotions in photography. She never thought her art would matter to anyone. But a local program for troubled teens discovered her Instagram account and offered her a mentorship. Fast forward 5 years, Christina now runs workshops for youth in foster care, teaching them how to use a camera to tell their truth. Her story didn't involve mansions or mysterious millionaires, but it carried the same core message. When someone believes in your worth, even for a moment, it can rewrite the entire story you've been told about yourself. Because belief, genuine, unselfish belief, is the one thing that can break cycles more powerful than money, abuse, or legacy. And for every Declan who finds redemption, there's a Lily who refuses to let her suffering define her future. Lily's story reminds us of something profoundly simple. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like quiet resilience, like choosing forgiveness over fury, like daring to love when every instinct tells you to run. She wasn't a warrior in armor. She was a survivor with a sketchpad, holding on to her sense of self when the world tried again and again to erase it. That's what makes her story so compelling. Because in every audience, there's someone like Lily, someone who's been overlooked, underestimated, mistreated, someone who's learned to endure silently. Maybe it's the girl growing up in a house where love is conditional. Maybe it's the boy who can't speak about the trauma he hides behind straight A's and fake smiles. Maybe it's someone listening right now. We live in a world that glamorizes strength as domination. But what if the truest kind of strength is the ability to remain kind in an unkind world? What if real power is having every excuse to become bitter, but choosing to stay soft? Declan, too, is a reflection of another truth, that healing often begins not when we find someone to fix us, but when we meet someone who reminds us of who we were before the world hurt us. His transformation wasn't Lily's responsibility, it was his. But her presence, her compassion, gave him the safety to even consider it. And maybe that's what love really is. Not rescuing each other, but recognizing each other. Offering the kind of stillness that says, I see you. I'm not here to control you. I'm here to witness you, fully. The home they built by the lake wasn't made of stone or glass. It was made of memory, of late-night talks, of paint-stained fingertips and burned omelets and bedtime stories told under blankets. It was imperfect, and that's exactly why it worked. One evening, long after their daughter had gone to bed, Lily and Declan sat on the back porch, legs dangling off the steps, listening to the sound of crickets and distant water lapping against the shore. "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting again?" Lily asked. Declan took a breath. All the time. She turned to him. "Do you regret anything?" His answer was immediate. "I regret not finding you sooner, but maybe I wasn't the man you needed until now." They didn't say anything more, because some truths don't need to be said. They just need to be held. And as we close this chapter, let's step back from the romance and look at the deeper current running beneath the story. This is not a fantasy about being rescued. It's a reminder that sometimes, even in the most broken corners of our lives, we are planting the seeds of something that will bloom later, often in ways we can't yet imagine. The fire Lily ran into as a child didn't just take part of her, it gave her something too. The unshakable belief that she could make a difference. And that belief carried her through years of neglect, betrayal, and loneliness, until finally, it brought her full circle to the very person she once saved, who now stood beside her, not out of obligation, but because he saw her for who she truly was. So here's the lesson. Your scars are not your shame. They are your signatures. They tell the story of survival, of bravery, of quiet victories that no one else clapped for. If you've been through pain, if you've lived through fire, know this. You are not defined by what hurts you. You are defined by what you did after, by how you rebuilt, by the fact that you kept going, even when no one was watching. And if you're lucky, one day someone will look at you not for your perfection, but for your persistence, and they'll say, "That one. That's the one I've been waiting for." Because in the end, love isn't a fairy tale. It's a choice. 1,000 small choices to show up, speak truth, and stay. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know or someone you used to be, share it. Let it ripple outward, because somewhere out there, there's another Lily waiting at the edge of the fire, unsure whether it's safe to believe again. Let's be the ones who show them that it is. Thanks for staying with us until the end. If this story moved you, made you think, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today. Subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey.